A transurrection happened in the Texas Capitol, and it could happen again. What does that mean? We're going to talk about that. Plus, as we edge towards the end of the legislative session, bills are dying. I'm Brandon Waltons. This is The Headline. Earlier this week, when legislation to ban gender mutilation procedures on minors was scheduled, at least, to be brought up in the Texas House, well, some of the leftist LGBTQ plus trans activists, well, they got kicked out. They actually had to clear the gallery after they were making noise, shouting, even unveiling a banner, breaking the House rules left and right. Ultimately, that bill ended up not even being heard that day. It's been delayed. It's going to be heard. Supposedly it's on the schedule for today, Friday. So we'll see what happens there. But to talk about this, plus a few other issues as we look towards the end of the regular legislative session, we have Michael Quinn Sullivan and, more importantly, Michael with a very, very cool little mug there.
Yeah, or new little travel mug.
Where do I get that? I'm just
look, if you, Brandon, become a $25 or more a month contributor to Texas Scorecard, you too can get one of these very cool travel mugs as a gift.
That is really cool. How much for the tote bag?
No tote bags.
No tote bags yet. Well, stay tuned.
Brandon, I'm very disappointed in social media. I'm very disappointed in social media because I was going to leave my sartorial choices to the masses, and I was offering to, because you told me you wanted to this morning talk about drag and the transsexuals. I was willing to put on a very nice,
this is one
nightgown and high heels and all that stuff. But the people said no.
This is one of those situations where the internet actually, came to the rescue there, with at least last look here, 43.6% of people saying gross no, which I think I voted that as well. So
I think you voted like 9 times.
Used all the accounts. So I mentioned at the top of the program, there was, it's being called a transurrection, right? Sort of a reference to what the left called, the January 6th protests. But, in this case, they were rioting inside the Capitol, essentially in the gallery. You had one person, even a man wearing a dress or a skirt, literally exposing himself to lawmakers, and predictably, leftist lawmakers are saying, these people were they were just exercising their rights, and even here in Travis County, where the Capitol is, of course, there's a leftist George Soros district attorney. It looks like none of these people that were arrested by DPS are even going to be prosecuted.
Yeah, it's so much wrapped up in what happened in those, in that hour or so earlier this week. Let us remember, it's easy to cry hypocrisy. Hypocrisy doesn't count if the other side doesn't recognize it, right? Mm-hmm. The Democrats, if you sneeze too loud as a conservative in the Texas Capitol, and they don't like you, they will demand that DPS clear the gallery. On the other hand, you saw people unfurling banners and yelling and shouting like they're in Tennessee or some other third world country, and suddenly that's acceptable form of protest. It is very cool though. I very much appreciate Jose Garza, Travis County's district attorney. I'm very glad I don't live in Travis County, but Travis County's attorney. I'm so thankful to him, because it's almost like he said, I think Republicans need a reminder as to why Republicans need to rein in leftist George Soros-funded DAs, because here he is not prosecuting a very clear crime. You have high-definition cameras all around the Texas Capitol, people with their iPhones and everything else, and yet Jose Garza said, I'm not going to prosecute because there's not enough evidence for it. Oh my goodness, just absolute travesty. The bigger travesty, of course, are all these adults who somehow feel like it's their moral obligation to ensure that children are victimized and sterilized and, traumatized through this, the cult of transsexual perversion.
Well, and it was one thing, when they started acting up, to his credit, House Speaker Dade Phelan was was quick to react. We've seen in the past sometimes when these groups get rowdy, they sort of, the speaker might let them get away with it, let it slide. In this case, they pretty quickly acted to clear the gallery and get them out of there. It was unfortunate as well, though, that you actually had, and I would based on kind of some estimates from looking at it, maybe 2/3 of the people there were actually people who were in support of the bill to ban. And they got kind of thrown out with the bathwater.
Yeah, this is in some ways where I have so little regard for anyone in the Texas legislature. A part of me thinks that Speaker Fields is looking for an excuse to kick them all out. That the Republicans, the weak-kneed, Democrat-enabling Republicans didn't want to be reminded of their, of what their base wants, and so easier to clear out the gallery. Again, I think if someone had sneezed too loud, Phelan probably would have cleared. It was just very useful for the narrative that it happened to be, men dressed as women who were causing the problems. Well,
and it looks like they're going to have another opportunity, though, to do this, as literally just moments after they were kicked out of the gallery and the House was cleared, the bill was brought up. And before they could even begin talking about it, a Democrat lawmaker called a point of order, essentially saying that there's something wrong with the bill or the bill analysis. In this case, it was that there was essentially a typo in the bill analysis, referring to pediatricians instead of pediatrics. And that was enough to send it back to committee, meaning that, it's now delayed a few days in the process. And people look at that and they were like, is this bill killed? And, I think we look at it, no, it looks like, it's on the calendar for Friday, right? I mean, unless it gets delayed again. But the real problem is what could potentially happen to some of those other bills that are not yet scheduled on a calendar.
Right. This is where, a lot of folks, me, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, grassroots activist leaders, a whole lot of people were pointing this out back in January and February, where the Texas House was taking 5-day weekends. Mm-hmm. They were, only meeting for 10 minutes on the House floor and then, heading off to whatever happy hour they had to go to. All those things go to what we are seeing now, which is, the mad dash of thousands of pieces of legislation kind of stacking up after committee hearings, ready to get on the House floor. And so when they play these delay games, it makes it just that much easier for legislation to die and for lawmakers to go home and say, oh, well, Brandon, we would have gotten your priority legislation accomplished, but we just ran out of time. It is very easy to say you've run out of time when you're controlling the clock.
Yes.
And the Texas House, you will see this occasionally at the end of session when there's something important to the House leadership. They will literally hold the clock at right before midnight to get things done. And then other times they will play these games where they delay and obfuscate to make it so that priorities run out of time.
Well, and that's kind of one of those things, especially people who are new to following this process. It doesn't make sense because it shouldn't make sense, right?
Right.
But I mean, this is what we see is that they will often delay, and it's not just this bill, by the way. A lot of bills have been postponed to Monday, Tuesday of next week, and of course, next Thursday, May 11th, at midnight is the deadline for House bills to be voted on, to be passed. So once that clock hits midnight, those bills are dead. But another thing that has been interesting to see, and we've started to see it over the last couple of weeks, is that there's a lot of talk about the legislature and the way it's set up. And when you look at the rules, kind of the first thing that sticks out about the rules is that, okay, the process is made not to pass bills, right, but to kill them. Last session, you had, I think, 15% of bills that were filed ultimately made their way to the governor's desk because they were killed in committee, they were not set on a calendar, or they died any other of the 100 ways that a bill can die. We have started to see what people who watch the legislature lovingly refer to as zombie bills that are voted down and then come back to life. Because when a bill is put on the calendar, it has an overwhelming chance. It's like over 95% chance that it's going to be passed. Well, earlier this week, we had House Bill 78 by a Democrat lawmaker that would have allowed El Paso to charge an additional $10 vehicle registration fee. Okay, that's on top of the fees, the annual fees that we all already pay every year to register our cars. Now, it first got voted down by a vote of about, I think, 60 in favor for it, about 80 or so opposed to it. Well, the bill wasn't dead because they can always reconsider a bill. And that's exactly what happened when Republican State Representative Tom Oliverson went to the microphone and said, I want to reconsider it. Tom Oliverson is somebody who initially voted against the bill, but then he said, I want to reconsider it. And sure enough, later on, next day, they pass it, no problem. This happens all the time. And it just shows you when they want to do something, they will get it done.
Yeah, and I think we should pay particular attention to the fact that it was a Democrats' bill, a Democrats' bill increasing a tax, a Democrats' bill increasing a tax to increase the size of government. And while it was narrowly bracketed to affect El Paso, make no mistake, it is coming to a county near you. And so here are Republicans. I have yet to find the Republican who campaigns on, we raise taxes. No, they all talk about cutting taxes, it's all about being taxpayer champions and all that sort of stuff. And yet, here they are, after killing a bill, they go to great lengths to bring it back to life so it can pass. And it's just one more swipe at Texas taxpayers in a Republican-controlled legislature.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, not to get too in the weeds of the process, but there's another process where some bills are put on a sort of a fast track local calendar is what it's called. And you had State Representative Tony Tinderholt. The rules say that on that calendar, because the bills are supposed to be sort of unanimous, things that aren't controversial, Tony Tinderholt, if you speak for 10 minutes, you can kill a bill off the calendar. He did that for 2 bills this week on Tuesday, and then or on Monday, and then literally just a couple days later, those bills were set on the regular calendar. They move so fast. And yet we're seeing bills like, example, a bill to ban minors from drag shows from targeting children. These sexually explicit shows, right? That hasn't been set for a calendar. We haven't seen movement on that. And there's any number of conservative priorities. And I think that's a frustrating thing when people see that.
Yeah, and we can certainly correctly blame lawmakers for their faithlessness, for their fecklessness on any number of these items. But fundamentally, Brandon, I think each one of us have to take responsibility for the fact that we're not demanding better of our lawmakers. That too many of us approach the Texas legislature with kind of a Fox News R versus D, and anything Republicans do is good, anything Democrats do is bad. The second part is true. The first part is not. And we just kind of and so we don't ask enough of our Republican-dominated legislature in Texas. It's very frustrating that you look at Florida and you look at Tennessee and you look at Georgia and you look at even Oklahoma, where they are making big strides this year and pushing some really important conservative legislation. And here's Texas, kind of slouching towards California. There are now 16, 17 states this year that have banned the practice of mutilating children and sterilizing them to appease the trans gods. And yet in Texas, it will probably still pass, but watered down, and it's currently on life support, as we've already talked about this morning. But it's very frustrating. All these other states are moving ahead, while here we are in allegedly the bastion of conservatism. There is an open question as to whether or not that and other conservative priorities get done.
All right. Well, we're going to be right back. But first, how do you spell women? Well, if you go to University of Texas, it might be a little different than you think. We'll explain all of that. But first, check this out.
If you're not watching the Luke Macias Show, then you are not as engaged as everybody else is in Texas who's trying to make a difference, knowing exactly what's going on so that they can take action on the things that really matter. Guys, watch us on the Roku app for Texas Scorecard. Watch us on YouTube. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Get engaged, get more informed, so together we can actually make a bigger difference on things that matter for the future of Texas. God bless you.
The question that has seemed to elude Democrats over the last, year or so at this point is, what is a woman? Well, now it seems they don't even know how to spell it. A language glossary from the University of Texas explains that some activists like to spell women W-I-M-M-I-N. That way they don't have the word men inside of women, and that can be obviously a triggering thing there. When this story came out, and Christopher Rufo is somebody who is a big kind of education, especially higher education activist that exposes a lot of this stuff. The university did take it down, but it's such a moving target. I mean, who would have thought we'd be making up words and spellings at this point?
Yeah, I thought that we had kind of reached the zenith of stupidity when we were spelling women W-O-M-Y-N. But now removing the O and the E, replacing it with two I's. I mean, it's just insane. It's just silly. There is that part of me that thinks, surely this was a joke. Surely this wasn't. But no, I mean, according to both Christopher Rufo, but then also some of the folks at UT who were very upset that the university took this language glossary down, goes to show, no, they were actually serious about this. Mm-hmm. And it kind of falls though into the same category as the push to use Latinx.
Yes.
And you had, there was all this great polling, I can't remember the numbers. It was 80-90% of folks of Hispanic and Latino origin who just said, that's disgusting. They were offended by it. Mm-hmm. Again, it's the left trying to play this weird game with gender. Everything about the left is coming down to appeasing, weird gender gods. And I think that at some point, normal people like Christopher Rufo and others have to come and say, then just start mocking it. I think too many of us take it too seriously. It's all very serious stuff, but sometimes you just have to point and laugh.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, and it's an easy target, right? And we constantly see, we could talk every day about some ridiculous leftist thing we're seeing out of public universities. At the same time, though, the joke gets a little less funny when you realize we're funding these and the legislature's supposed to be watching them. And they've largely, I'd say, derelicted that duty. The last thing I want to talk about real quick is that, it's already, we're talking about the legislative session, and now we're already switching over to the campaign season of next year. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, running for his third term, has a challenger in Democrat Congressman Colin Allred. Representative Allred made the announcement this week in a video. Didn't really talk about his leftist voting record, which, yes, he has, mostly sort of focused on, the usual kind of campaign video, meaningless sort of nothings. But this is going to be a presidential year. It seems like this is probably a suicide mission for any Democrat who's trying to run statewide in Texas.
Yeah, it's been 10,918 days since a Democrat last held a U.S. Senate seat in Texas. So it's been a long time. That is almost 30 years, and that was when a Democrat appointed by Ann Richards had to give up the seat after a special election to Kay Bailey Hutchison in June of 1993. Mm-hmm. So the Democrats are not going to win a U.S. Senate seat anytime soon. Certainly not in 2024. Colin Allred, clearly, he's a guy who is either just not all there, which is probably true, or he's a guy who's just kind of done with being in Congress, which quite honestly, being with the 435 worst people in the country probably does get tiring, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, and looking for an escape route. And for a lot of these people in public office who they can't just leave, they want to run for something else and figure that's an honorable way to leave. So rather than just leaving, he's going to get his hat handed to him by Ted Cruz or whoever the Republican nominee is in 2024.
Yeah, well, and it's a fun thing. I mean, you get to travel around the state and be the leftist media.
He'll have his face on the side of a bus. You have his face on the side of the bus. He'll have all these accolades. He'll be offered some late night commenting gig on MSNBC or something for a while. It'll be good for his ego. And the other exciting thing that's coming out, there are rumors there are a couple members of the legislature who are thinking about running for the Democratic nomination for the Senate. Roland Gutierrez being one of them, Mr. Anti-Gun in 2023. So it's going to be fun to watch all of them beat each other up going to the left, which will only help things for Republicans in Texas in 2024.
Always fun to watch. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for watching. If you're checking us out on YouTube, go ahead, hit like, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way you can be notified every time we've got new content for you here at Texas Scorecard. For right now, I'm Brandon Waltons. Have a great weekend.
No ads, no paywalls, no government grants, and no corporate masters. Just real news for real Texans. This is Texas Scorecard.